Okay, so good afternoon. My name is Nelson Tavares Silva. I'm the Business Development Manager at QBS. I'm really pleased to have this session together with Tony about IoT, Internet of Things, which he says your things. The purpose of the session is to give you some insight around the Internet of Things, how easy or how difficult it is, depends on your knowledge and background, of course, but Tony will explain that it is very easy to start today, but also to give you some indications and some ideas on how to start with the Internet of Things. So for me, I want to wish you a great session with Tony. And Tony, well, let's rock and roll.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on the call. And very welcome everybody in the call. If you have any questions during the call, feel free to unmute your mic and speak up, ask your question. Or you can also, of course, use the chat window, type your question there and just shoot it out there. Nelson, if you'll be able to moderate that and see what's going on, so then don't have the chat window open, of course, all the time.
Yeah, no problem. We'll do that. Daniel
Awesome.
will do that for you. Yeah.
Great. Yep. So a little bit about Internet of Things. We started, of course, with a lot of capabilities in Azure a long time ago. But recently my role changed and I've also been asked to look at the Internet of Things. And as we always say, it's the Internet of your things, whatever you have and how to work with that. Diving deeper into that, what was possible, what the capabilities were, I was really surprised with all the capabilities that are in there and how easy it is. So let me just dive into what's the objective of this session? What would I like to hope you get from this session? And basically it's more like a demonstration around the steps, how you can get started with Internet of Things. We're going to walk through some Azure components that essentially will lead how you can connect them to Dynamics. So we're trying to make a full circle here from getting the device, how you set it up, and of course most of these things are just step-by-step guides to get the basic knowledge of what it does and how it works. But then essentially we're going to walk through the steps, like what are the components we use to get that information to create a ticket or an event or a case or a lead or whatever you want into Dynamics, where the actual business process of the customer can then pick it up further. At the end, we're going to walk through some resources we have available. Some resources we will show throughout the demonstration as well. So with that, Internet of Things, of course, is a hot hype buzzword. You hear a lot about it. Comes in a lot of the opportunities for businesses and companies alike. You see it a lot, and of course it is a really big thing. With just in a few years we expect to be 20-30 billion devices to be connected to the internet, and the amount of money, the revenue to be made with these solutions is huge. The industry indicates this goes up to billions of dollars for specific solutions. So it's an important part of Azure as well to see what we can do with the data in there and how you can get it basically into a business process. And that's one of the reasons I spoke with Nelson about this, and I said, I think it's really interesting, especially for Dynamics partners, because in essence, a lot of the partners with Dynamics already are hooking into business processes. They are having solutions or building solutions with the software. And this is basically an easy way to extend some of those business processes with some devices. And that's basically also where we're going to walk through. So, sorry. The whole idea about is connection. How do we get devices connected? Then from that point on, we have the device sending us data. This data needs to be turned into insights, and those insights can be used to transform your business. And this can, of course, be really high level, and that's what you most of the times hear. Internet of Things are these huge, massive deployments, huge scalable solutions where a lot of devices are being deployed, and then we're going to create these templates that get us all the data. We're going to do machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all these words that are really meaning a lot, of course, and there's a lot of capabilities in there, but it's more like the huge prospect of everything that's possible, right? So we hear a lot about machine learning and how you really can have the devices and everything predict what's going on, what's predictive maintenance, when are things going to break, and then let you know up front before somebody else calls you, right? So that really helps you to transform your businesses. What I want to do is bring it down and say, like, well, of course, those are huge projects and great opportunities, but in the end, what can I do today? What are the possibilities I have today using the standard functionality that's in there? So we have a lot of cases already out there from all these things that are connected. You see quite a few funny there. You can expect the most usual suspects, of course, things like monitoring of oil distribution or where's the bus. And actually, you can see that a lot if you go to the cities today. Sorry. Just a simple thing is like how many more minutes before the next bus arrives. It's all basically Internet of Things. But you also see there cows. That's a project we did with Fujitsu Siemens. And it turns out if you add a step counter to a cow, then after a cow has set a certain amount of steps, they're more receptible for getting the cow pregnant, which results in better pregnancies and more calves, of course. A lot of different things out there that already are, again, one of those big solutions, you know, with intelligence and templates and everything added to that. If you want to learn more about those big cases, we have a ton of the business cases available. I'll show you one cool demo from Rolls-Royce. We have that as a website where you can click through, and we'll share that with you. But once again, it's more like the high-level overview of the top capabilities that are all in there. So what we're going to do today is basically we're going to take one of devices. There are plenty of devices you can use. You can use any Raspberry Pi with a bunch of sensors on it. I have a whole set of Groove. We'll show later, talk a little bit more about Groove. They have all sorts of sensors. It doesn't matter what you want to monitor or what you want to detect. It has a sensor for it, whether it's light, it's distance, it's gas, it's water, moisture, temperature, you name it. Every sensor is available as a simple board. You click on a Raspberry Pi and then you can monitor it. I like to use this one for this setup because it's a rather cheap board. It's an Azure IoT Development Kit. This kit has sensors for motion, so whether you move it around, humidity, temperature, pressure, and magnetometer. So it has a lot of sensors already built in without the need to plug in an extra sensor or configure extra sensors, and it's going to send all that information to the cloud. So I'll jump out of the slides now, and let's just dive right in. Okay, so first thing I would like to do basically is just give you a notion of how hard is it to configure a device, or what are the capabilities for that. So for that, I'm just going to search, apparently that specific prototype of the Azure Development Kit is also a flight to LAX. Great, but that's also what I was looking for. I'm looking to this one. So we have a ton of documents that help you how to connect a device to an Azure IoT Hub. So on the left here, you can see that I have the ability to use Raspberry Pi with different types of code, this specific IoT Development Kit, an Intel Edison, Feather, SparkFun, and these are all basically devices we can use. Well, how difficult is it? Well, let's just walk through. Basically, with this guidance, it's a step-by-step manual. So make sure you have the device, make sure you have the cable. All right, so connect the device, look at the lights, configure the Wi-Fi. It's here really step-by-step how you can configure this device. And like I said, this is just to get a notion of it, get started with it, and this is a great document to get some things going. It has a download, a zip file, you unpack it, it has a install script, and once everything is installed, you basically can go then and configure the device. So basically we're gonna, this is for the Mac, but we're gonna just run connect it to the computer. It's gonna say like, okay, how do I connect to the cloud? We're gonna connect to the cloud, and you follow these steps, and then it will create an IoT hub in the Azure subscription you have. So like I said, this is really easy step by step. So once you've done this, you've connected the device, it's connected to the IoT Hub, then what? Well, actually, that's where the fun starts, because if I'm going to go to my Azure, in Azure, we have a lot of different services and resources we can create. As you might know, of course, we have virtual machines, databases, Active Directory, etc., etc. But recently, we also have the ability to add an IoT Hub. So what's an IoT Hub? IoT Hub is actually nothing more than an endpoint. It's a service bus with more capabilities. And this basically allows me to look at the devices that are connected to it. As you can see here in this particular IoT Hub, I only have one IoT device connected to it, which is that AZ3166 device. So we've configured the device, it's connected, and here you can see which keys and everything it's been using. So I can even send a message to the device if I want, and it will show up on the display that you see in that picture. So let's go back to the IoT Hub. Once the device is connected to the IoT Hub, we can basically say, okay, so now it's providing me with data. You can see here I'm receiving messages. So what can I do with these messages? Well, from the IoT Hub, I can do a lot of things where I can send it. We do this using endpoints. So an endpoint can be a specific events, as you can see here. You can use, that's basically what information is coming in. But you can also say, let's add another endpoint. And by adding endpoints, this is basically like whatever comes in, send it on to something else. So it's basically from this hub, you're going to send it somewhere else. So let's create a demo endpoint. Right here, you can see what kind of endpoints do I have. So I can send it to a storage container, which is basically storage, so I can store all the information that's coming in. You can also send it to a queue. Well, a queue is nothing more than a real queue, and the reason we need these kind of components, and you need to understand, of course, about it, is because from the IoT Hub we go to a queue, and then from that point on we can pick it up in other solutions. Yep. Let me dismiss. Put it on quiet. Yep. All right. So we can go to this. Once again, if I go back to my the little demos and manuals we had here, you can see here we also have extended IoT scenarios right there as well. So looking at the extended IoT scenarios, here once again are step-by-step guidance how you can connect your device and then have information stored in storage accounts. and you can do analytics on it. So this is all really step by step helping you how to build a solution in Azure with the IoT functionality. Now, when it comes to storing information and sensor information, not everything that comes in is something I need to be storing. You might say that some parts of it are actually like, I only need to know if there's an exception, right? I can measure the temperature on a device. For instance, if my customer has a cooling trucks, or they have specific processes where temperature is important, then I don't need to be notified of that temperature constantly. Then I only need to be notified if there's an exception on the temperature, if the temperature gets too hot or it gets too low. So that's steps you can take with, for instance, you can see here the different way you do analysis on that. So hot path analysis really looks at the information comes through, and then you can say like, okay, if there's an exception, immediately take action on that. But if, for instance, if you just want to have a history of it, you want to see like in the past, did that temperature ever at some point get above a certain point, then you have the cold path analytics for that. It's really easy as well to say like, well, take all that information and send it to Power BI. And also here you can see which components are using. So all the scenarios I'm showing you is really all plain simple, like, hey, the information gets from a sensor to a device connects to the Azure IoT Hub, and then we, for instance, to get it to Power BI, we connect it to Stream Analytics, and the Stream Analytics then forwards it to Power BI. So we'll go through some of the scenarios you see here, and just bear with me because I'm just going to show a bunch of configuration options in Azure. I don't expect you to understand what exactly are those components and what they are doing right now, but it's just to give you the notion of it's where it is, what it looks like, and how you configure it. So let's get back to my IoT Hub. We have the different IoT hubs here. And for instance, let's say I want to add Stream Analytics. So going into my IoT Hub, you can see here we have the different endpoints. Oh, sorry, I have to go to Stream Analytics then. So we have a Stream Analytics here. So going to the Stream Analytics, here I can look at inputs, and this is basically where you take an input. So right here, what I've done, I said like, okay, create a new stream, and what are we going to take as an input? And actually, let me just quickly do that again so you get the notion of how simple it is to connect to that. Azure Stream Demo 2. All right, location, create. So it's deploying that Stream Analytics. I go to that resource, it's been created, and now let's go here to inputs, and it says, okay, where do I take the input from? So I'm going to add a stream input, and here you can see I take IoT Hub. So I'm going to give it a name. It says, which hub do you want to choose? And you can see we have the different IoT hubs in my subscriptions are available for me. I can just leave this all as it is, take the consumer group we created, which you do in the manual, and save it. All of it right now is said like, take the input from the IoT Hub, and now from that point on, I can actually go like, okay, what kind of functions do I want to add? What kind of queries do I want? Do we want to get specific input? You want to filter that, or you can do something with that right here. I'm just going to pass it through to output, so I'm not going to do anything else there than just select where they want to put it. And here you can see that from that IoT Hub, it just can go to the as output. I can take a SQL database, storage, table storage, service bus, etc., etc. And as well, I can go to Power BI. So output alias. Yep, load workspaces, so I can authorize. So it's going to validate me for Power BI. And if I validate that, it's basically going to be able to take all that input that comes from the devices and then send it to Power BI. This just takes a little too long. Let me try that again. Yep. So I just need to authenticate. Power BI, and that information is then used to get that. Okay. Now I can create a dataset name, a table, and save that. For some reason it doesn't. Try that one more time, and otherwise you can just assume that the information will eventually, of course, flow to the Power BI. That's really cool, because when you get that information from Power BI there, of course, you can create custom views with the information that comes from the devices and sort on locations and do all kinds of cool visualizations of that. Yeah, at some point that's not going through now, but that's just the idea of like getting an output for a stream. So let's take it one step further. Let's say we have our IoT Hub once again. We have data coming in, but now I want to add some logic to get how do you connect it then, for instance, to a Dynamics environment. So in Azure we have various components. One of those components is a service bus. So basically a service bus is a like an IoT Hub, a bus where information can come on. I've created a service bus here, and in that service bus we have different queues. So you can create more queues. I created one queue for that information coming in from the IoT Hub. So how do you connect those two? The first thing you do is you create the service bus and the queue. Then you go to the IoT Hub. Click here. And on this IoT Hub, we have these endpoints. So one of the endpoints we created here is just that service bus. So that means, once again, every information that comes in is going to go into that service bus. From the service bus, I can go into another functionality, which is logic apps. Now, logic apps might be familiar with something you know as flow. Flow is basically the ability for what a user has in their Office 365 or a subscription to basically say, like, you know, when an email is received, do this with it or do that with it. It's a if this, do that kind of scenario. In Azure, we have that same functionality. So I can say, like, create a new logic app. And let me just create the IoT demo. Use the existing resource group and click create. Deployment in progress. What you'll see, this is basically the ability to have a drag and drop of different blocks, building blocks, that allows you to create a step-by-step application, basically. So there's a great introduction video here to get you started. But as you can see here, we already have some templates ready for you. So copy new CRM context to a data model, all different if this, do that kind of scenarios are available here. What I want to do is I want to start here with a blank logic app. With the blank logic app, we're basically having a lot of triggers and connectors where you can start with. So all these triggers and events you can see here are things you can start with. So you can do a simple thing like querying an HTTP server, whether certain status or component is updated, and then just grab that and start from there. What I'm going to do is use that Azure Service Bus. And you can see here, these are the different options for Service Bus. And once again, this is all different components that quickly flash by, but just get the notion of I'm just clicking a few components here, a few components there, and I'm snapping them then all together. So far what I've done is I created the service bus and I created a queue, and then in my IoT Hub I said, like, whatever comes in, forward it to that service bus. Now, when one or more messages arrive in the queue, then I want to do something with those messages. So let's click on that step. And it says, okay, which is the name of your queue? So I'm going to drop down, and you can see it will find my queue here. Now, maximum number of messages, I can set that to a number. So let's say 175. And how often do you want to check for new items? So depending on how mission critical this is or what part of the process is, you can say, like, okay, every 3 minutes is the default, so it's fine. All right. So then the next step, you can say here we can have an action. So whenever something comes in that queue, create an action, or I can say create a condition. So this condition basically is going to say, like, well, there's some value coming from that that device coming in, or the devices are coming in the queue. So here I can say, for instance, if temperature, and you can see here it gets a couple of fields here, but you can split that further down, for instance, to that temperature by using the expression. You can split it down to the temperature or to the pressure or humidity, or etc., etc. So we can just add that in here. Let's say content is equal to, now, and then you can add a value 30. Then so if it's true, then we can add another action here. And from the actions, we can then choose all different options we have available. So once again, ton of already pre-configured functionality. So I can say, like, well, if that value is true, it's fine to just use mail. So I can send an email out. And you can see here you have different options to use mail, Gmail, Google Tasks, MailChimp, Office 365 Groups, Outlook, or even Outlook.com can be used. If the condition is false, then I could do another step. This can go away. Let's see. Well, if it's false, you get the same notion if you can do another step then. And then from that point on, of course, you can continue with additional steps. So instead of using email, I'm going to type Dynamics here. Dynamics. Then you can see we can get all this functionality of Dynamics 365. So I started with the message arriving in the queue. But of course, perhaps in this situation, it's also possible to, of course, start with Dynamics with get a record and then check that towards something that comes from the queue and take action on that. So this is all just drag and drop or create that. Right? So we can have different options here, but I'm going to just say create a new record. That will require me, of course, to sign in to Dynamics 365. Just going to use this account for that. All right. Drop down, choose the organization name, entity. Use that entity. It's loading now. And here you can see all the different fields that are available. So is this a service organization? Of course, you can create a case, or in the case of what I'm just going to use here is, well, this is all the information available. But we basically can choose here to also go to leads. And once I selected that, I have the ability to also fill in other functionality, say more. Save that. Yep. All right, so this is an example of how something in the queue, if the content is available or equal to that or not, then if true, then create a lead. So what I've done is I've also created a logic app here. So I'm just going to jump to that one, which is this one right here. This is also an IoT device. And this IoT device is connected to my washing machine. I have an old washing machine, and the washing machine basically it doesn't have any intelligence, but it does have a little LED light that goes on if it's done with its program. The little light says finished. So I added a little device to it that just has this HTTP GET method. So I don't need to use the IoT Hub for this device. Just going to go out there and it's going to get a value called lux, which is the light intensity. And then from that point on, I just created this condition, and it says if the lux is greater than 1200, then send me an email that the laundry is done. And so what I've added here, that if it's not greater than 1200, I've created this value like leads and add the status code there in that leads functionality. You can see here as well, I can have all the fields from that option, from the lead, already filled out if there's information coming in from that device or that specific functionality. So if I'm going to hit run here, basically it's going to do the whole process, going to check that trigger, see whether the value is higher than 1200 or not. And if so, it will send me an email. And you can see here, it just created this new record. So what I'll do now is I'll jump to my CRM right here. So going to sales and going to leads. Let me just reload that page. And obviously I did a few demo test runs, so you can see that I have a few demo leads already created. And when we refresh that, the new lead that was just created will be visible there as well. It's just loading. there's that lead. And you can see here that Azure IoT reported 200. That's actually nothing more than a status code, which I pasted here in the record as dynamic content. So if I go to Designer and open that Create New Record, you can see you can add that dynamic content. So information that comes from the email or information that comes from the HTTP request, you can actually just add that to specific fields in the record that you are creating. So whatever data comes into the queue, you can tag those and actually have those already available in the field. So that could be like the location, the exception, what's going on, etc., etc. So that in a nutshell was how we got from a simple device to Dynamics. Now let me walk you through some of the capabilities for devices. I talked a little bit about Groove. This is the Groove capabilities. I always go to this website. I have the link in the PowerPoint, but it's seedstudio.com. It has 3 E's there, but they have a ton of devices that are great for just testing and prototyping. So if you don't want to, like, of course, for just a prototype or a test, you don't need to get, of course, a whole hardware solution developed. You can just take anything with like the Groove sensors we talked about. So what you see here is a little board that you can connect to a Raspberry Pi, and then they just have a ton of different sensors that you can then connect to. So this can be something that has input, has display, LED sensors, and you name it. And if I go and look at the sensors they have, you can see here they have infrared, motion, light sensors, the one I use to my laundry machine, and it goes on and on. So it's a huge list of just little devices they have. And the cool thing about all these devices and the sensors they have, you don't need to know like much programming or anything. Like there's a GitHub library with how you can sense that specific sensor and how you would program it then. So those are the sensors and how to use them. So another solution I would like to show you, that's more for remote monitoring, everything like that. I've shown you the simple steps. Just take a device, get started, get some data in there, take it to Power BI, take it to a queue, and then take a logic app and do some steps with it. But if you really want to take it, of course, into multitude of devices, what do you deploy there, and what are the opportunities, then we have a website called AzureIoTSuite.com. Requires me to log on, so I'm going to do that. The reason it wants you to log on is what it's going to check whether you have a valid Azure subscription. So if you log in with an account that has an Azure subscription, it can check whether it has already deployed a provision, and here you can say create a new solution. And what you see here is pre-configured solutions which come with abilities for like remote monitoring or connected factory, predictive maintenance, etc., etc. So if I click here on select, it's going to take me to a predictive maintenance solution. And what you see here is that it basically has this whole template where it says like, okay, I'm going to create an Active Directory temp application, one IoT hub, an event hub, some storage accounts, stream analytics, app plans. There's a website included with it. And when you do this, so just give this solution a name, predictive demo. It's going to choose my subscription here. What region do I want to land this? So West Europe, please. If I'm going to say create solution, it will automatically deploy all those components into Azure, and then I can really see how they build it. So this is like a reference template for predictive maintenance. And like I said, once you get that stream analytics job or the queue, the data is coming into the IoT Hub. From that point, of course, you can go to any component in Azure and take it then to the Logic app to bring it, for instance, to Dynamics. I'm not going to hit Create Solution now. I'm just going to hit Cancel here. I'd like to show you the remote monitoring demo that I already have. Go back one more, because that's one I already deployed. So I'm going to hit Launch. And you can see here, this is a dashboard. So this is, again, a complete solution template that's deployed to my Azure environment. And they have these virtual appliances. So they're kind of like random, making entering data into the whole IoT system. You can see here there are different alarms and humidity levels set. So whenever something triggers, you get an alarm sent here. And here you can see the devices as well. So what I once did is, as a matter of test, I just took this solution and then I deleted all the virtual devices that are in here, and I just added a few physical devices. So whatever data I got in was actually from the physical device. And then if I, put your finger on the temperature sensor there, you can actually see that graph in the dashboard going live to that higher level. So this is great for just playing around with what is really capable and taking it to the next level. Basically, my point is, with this demo specifically, is just like get started, get one device, make sure it measures something, water, temperature, whatever, and then start to create jobs for that. For instance, link it to a Logic app and link it to your Dynamics. So once you get that thing set up, then start extending it and building it into further solutions. This is one website that's so the Azure IoT Suite.com. If I go to this Create New Solution, they have some click-through demos here as well. So you can see here for the new remote monitor, they have an interactive demo. So you can click through that one, begin demo, and it says this whole click through step by step of how you can create a dashboard with specific topics. And of course, this is great eventually if you can say like, hey, some part is going to be failing, then we need to schedule the part, is it on stock? Do we have resource available to create that? So another way to demonstrate that is a great website here, which is the Rolls-Royce demo website. Microsoft has done a great business case with Rolls-Royce on capturing data, analytics, and everything like that. So if you go to this website, you just type in any name and any password. And if I click next, you basically get a view of how Rolls-Royce would be able to monitor the different flights going on with their motors. And then they can see like what specific predictive maintenance functionality do we have. So you can see here, there's different scheduling here. If I click on this emergency, you can see here, this is the plane, this is the captain, this is where it's going. You can see here there's a variance in what they expected versus what actual is. You can click once again in these different sets. You can see this is the engine, what's the optimization, and here we have a warning on that primary fuel pump. We can see here there's an expected usage and what currently, let's see what that is. You have the fuel flow over time, and basically the whole set. What you see here is they say like, hey, you know what? It's actually now in the red here, so we have to replace this fuel pump. So you can see here, time to departure is still 3 hours 45 minutes. We have available parts, we have technicians available, and I'm just going to hit request maintenance here. So you can see here, it's going to say what happens. So the predictive remaining useful life was that green line, but already today you can see it's hitting the threshold. So better replace it now than just take it one flight longer. The checklist says assign the available inventory. So take one out of the inventory, go to the schedule of the technicians and schedule them, create that service task for them to work on and update the archived records. Click confirm, and basically it's going to fire off all these tasks in the backend to get those engineers and everybody in action to replace that pump before that goes onto the next flight. So that's a demo site that anyone can basically use to go through and see what the capabilities are there with really big solutions with predictive maintenance, and that's with machine learning templates, etc., etc. Once again, the goal of the session here is to start small. So let me just wrap it up quickly. These are the URLs, and I make sure that we get the slides to you so you can use them yourself. Azure IoT Suite is the site I just showed you with the templates. That's Seed Studio for buying sensors or devices. And that's the link to the step-by-step guides, the Azure IoT Hub. And finally, there's the Rolls-Royce Azure Websites.net webpage, where we can just go through a really high overview of what predictive maintenance would look like for Rolls-Royce. That ends the demo, which I had in mind. So, of course, I can talk for hours which other capabilities there are, what the whole transformation is that's going on, where we're all part of basically. But at this point, I would like to open it up for questions. So let's do a few minutes of questions and see what you guys think of this, and then we'll take it from there. Nelson. Any questions at this point? Something else I can show you guys, dive into some other parts? You can either unmute your mic or you can just type it in the chat window. And I can type it as well.
I think we can leave it by this.
Yep. Okay.
No questions. The session is recorded, and we will share this in the next upcoming days with you, as well as the slides.
All right. Great.
Oh, somebody's typing.
Okay. Thanks.
Once again, Tony, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for joining, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.